Viable Magic the Gathering decks can be very expensive. With the average modern deck costing over $1,000, it is hard for new players to get into the format without selling a kidney. In this video, we are going to be playing the same archetype at 3 very different prices to see how starting with a cheaper build of a deck and giving it upgrades works effectively in Modern. A $10 deck that can win games in Modern is definitely difficult to find, but after finding Saffron Olive's $35 Infect build, which I have to say is not even $35 anymore, would be a good start. Infect is a cheap but explosive game plan that can definitely be built with a budget. However, I instantly had problems because there are so many good playables that are over $10 just for a set of 4. After looking around at many pump spells that I can use to beef up our Infect creature to have a fast kill, I discovered Fortifying Draw. For 1 mana, we gain 2 life and a creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of life gained this turn. Well, I discovered that 4 copies of Nourishing Shoal is less than $3. To go alongside it, we have Titanoth Rex, a big creature that we can also cycle if needed. Pitching the Rex to the Shoal will mean our Fortifying Draught gives +11/+11, and that makes an Infect creature lethal. Having a small life gain theme, I also added Voracious Worm, because this alongside Nourishing Shoal can make an 11/11 creature. But as we are Infect, we only have 2 copies in the deck because I'm trying to keep it focused on the fast kill. This was the cheapest deck that I could come up with that I thought would be decent for a player to at least win a few matches at FNM. So let's fight a competitive online tournament with this budget monstrosity. To start off the first round, we're on the draw with an extremely slow land heavy hand, so we've got to go to 6. However, we find the Nourishing Shoal and the Titanoth Rex, so we've got to keep this and hope that an 11/11 creature will beat the opponent. But I'm instantly disappointed because the opponent seems to be on Blue-Red Murktide with a Scalding Tarn. Yes, Richard Garfield paired me against Bird in the first round with Nourishing Shoal and Worm in our hand, and now with the Glistener Elf off the top, we can play that and pass back the turn. To beat the opponent while they're down, they play a Monastery Swiftspear, attacking with both creatures, and we don't block, and they miss their second land. Now we can Nourishing Shoal, gaining 9 life, and our Voracious Worm will enter the battlefield with 9 +1/+1 counters. With a mana-screwed Burn opponent, I highly doubt they're going to have Path to Exile in the main. With the opponent being mana-screwed and only having creatures, they just chump blocked for the rest of the game and eventually conceded because they just couldn't deal with my board. Going into boarding, I'm worried about the opponent having a heavy creature draw, so I'm going to board in Lovestruck Beast as it's a great blocker. Honestly, Burn seems like a decent matchup because here our opening hand is Nourishing Shoal, Fortifying Draught, and the Voracious Worm. So if we can find a Titanoth Rex off the top, then we're going to be in a very good spot, and if not, the Fortifying Draught gains life on its own, and a small Nourishing Shoal can make a big Voracious Worm. The opponent mulligans to 5, starts off with the Goblin Guide and reveals a Blossoming Defense off the top of the deck. With nothing else to do on turn 1, we just gotta play our land and say go. The opponent then follows up with a second Goblin Guide and bashes in, but this time reveals Titanoth Rex off the top of the deck. We are definitely running hot. After they bash in, they play their land and pass back the turn. Here, I'm very worried about Path to Exile, but I'm also equally worried about Skullcrack. So I'm going to go for the Nourishing Shoal because if they do have Path to Exile, I still gain the 9 life, and I get a basic land out of my deck. You could wait an extra turn so you have Blossoming Defense up, but then you do get blown out by Skullcrack, so I'm just going to go for it now. Unfortunately, the opponent does have the Path to Exile, and clearly that's why they mulligan down to 5. Now this is a slight problem with our build of Infect in that we are very low on threats if the opponents have a lot of removal spells, so they get 2 free attacks with the Goblin Guides until we find a Lovestruck Beast. Here we have the same predicament. Do we want to tap out or do we want to hold up Blossoming Defense? And I think here I'm just going to use the full Lovestruck Beast because they will have to use 2 Lightning Bolts and we can save 2 life with the human token if they do have a way to kill the beast. I get a sigh of relief for playing into the Path to Exile because they have a Skullcrack on my end step to deal me 3 damage. On the opponent's turn, they play a land and attack in, revealing a Voracious Worm off the top of the deck, which is very convenient with the amount of life gain we have in our hand. So here I'm just going to block with the Lovestruck Beast and force the opponent to have a removal spell, and then we can use Fortifying Draught and Nourishing Shoal to pump up this Voracious Worm. However, they combine Searing Blades to trade with the Goblin Guide and also kill the Lovestruck Beast. Now what we can do is attack him with the human token, use Nourishing Shoal to gain 1 life, then use Fortifying Draught to make it get +3/+3, and then play the Voracious Worm with 3 +1/+1 counters and hold up Blossoming Defense. I'm feeling pretty confident about this spot. The opponent just uses Lava Spike on my face to put me down to 7 and then passes back the turn. With another Nourishing Shoal off the top, we can attack in for 5 and put them lethal on the board next turn. After the opponent passes back again, clearly implying they want to chump block, we're just going to attack in for 5 and see what they have. The opponent does chump block, fetches a basic mountain on our end step, and untaps. The opponent uses Skullcrack, so we're going to have to Nourishing Shoal in response, leaving 1 mana up so that we can play around Path to Exile, and then they Boros Charm us in response to show us that they had lethal. So wow, we had to get very lucky to win this match. While this deck isn't that good, for $10 I was able to win a lot more games than you would think I would be able to against tier 1 $1,000 decks. So while I did lose round 2 and round 3 in game 3, it shows that there is a possibility for a $10 deck to be powerful enough to be played at FNM. Now this deck does have a lot of weaknesses, and that does come along with a $10 price tag. For example, if the opponent just plays creatures to block, you can't bash through because not only do you not have a flying creature, you don't have an evasive creature, which you do have access to in the expensive build of Infect. And this is where enjoying a cheap deck allows you to make expensive upgrades if you want to go deeper into the Magic rabbit hole. You can just pick up 4 Inkmoth Nexus and this deck becomes a lot better. Upgrading this deck is very easy. As a lot of the power from Infect comes from the good creatures and powerful pump spells, it is exactly what we're going to be looking to upgrade in the $100 version. As a multicolored mana base and Inkmoth Nexus is still out of our budget, bringing it into the $200 and $300 range, we can only add Waterlogged Grove as a way to draw cards when we do Flood. As you can see, this list is starting to transform into what you would expect it to look like, and it definitely reflected on our results. Venerated Rotpriest is one of the biggest upgrades to this deck, not only giving the opponent a poison counter when they have a removal spell, but also being able to give the opponent poison counters when we pump our creatures made this deck way more viable. And not only that, but it stacks, so if you have 3 Venerated Rotpriests on the board, you get 3 triggers when the opponent or you target your own creature. Having Venerated Rotpriest made the control matchup a lot easier in this spot because while they did have Solitude and they did have Counterspell, they just couldn't target my creatures because then they would die. After a swift win in game 1 and the opponent getting mana screwed in game 2, it was a very easy pickup to beat the opponent. Now there was a slight problem with the deck, and that I still had the problem of having no evasion to get around the opponent's creatures. Here in this round against Hammer Time, my opponent played turn 1 Esper Sentinel and 2 Ornithopters, and I could never attack through the opponent. What's even more sad is we had a Blight Mamba in hand, which would be a Blighted Agent if we are playing the most upgraded version. So it's clear that there's still some weaknesses for playing this build, you just have no evasion. What is nice though is that having access to Nature's Claim in the sideboard was a big deal against Amulet Titan without Titan because it's some weird Aspiring Spike build. I don't know, go ask Aspiring Spike what this deck is, but we managed to Nature's Claim the first Amulet of Vigor, then we had to destroy the second Amulet of Vigor, and then after destroying the second one, we destroyed the third one to be able to win this game. Yes, we beat the opponent having 3 Amulet of Vigors. Noble Hierarch was definitely an MVP in this match because we wouldn't have been able to do this without the mana. After getting beaten by Blue-Red Murktide with MTGO personality Doomswitch, it was clear that I had to move on to the most expensive build because there were clear flaws with this deck. The $1,000 version of this deck is exactly what you would expect. Perfect mana base, evasive creatures, very efficient pump spells, but most importantly, interaction with the opponent. Both mono-green builds had the same problem. We just couldn't keep up with the opponent was doing whilst also threatening a lethal kill. In the first round, we displayed it perfectly, having a very fast kill in the first game, and then locking the opponent out with Venerated Rotpriest in the second. Having such cheap, interactive, and impactful creatures and lands made it very difficult for the opponent to both keep up with their game plan and also disrupt mine. Here the opponent had to tap out for a Solitude, and we can counter that just with a 1 mana Vines of Vastwood. Not only that, but abusing the triggers from Venerated Rotpriest allowed us to kill them without even having to attack. Venerated Rotpriest works well alongside Spellskite, and that's because you can redirect cards to Spellskite and the Venerated Rotpriest will trigger again. So with Spellskite on the board and then playing a Venerated Rotpriest, it made it so that the opponent got double poison counters for every spell that I cast or every spell that they cast. So for example here, the opponent used Unholy Heat on my Venerated Rot Priest, and now we can redirect using the Spellskite, and because that targets the Spellskite, the Venerated Rot Priest triggers again. From here, the opponent just conceded the game when we used a scale up, so we started off this tournament at 3-0. With 3 wins, the last 2 rounds I sadly lost both of them, ending 3-2, so here's the chest for you gambling degenerates. I have to go because I'm currently moving house. Don't forget to like and subscribe, bye!